Is videotaping your cousin?
No.
Okay. Because I like the sun. Mom, where are we at? Japanese garden, I think.
Coming down this way.
Okay.
You do.
I got rid of it because I had kids. I'm like, oh, now I need to one. I know, right? Okay, one day I will. Or buy an iPhone, either one here.
Buy an iPhone. Don't buy an iPhone.
Well, I think iPhone has a better.
That might have a better picture quality, but the
And then we
batteries
can do videos.
are slow, Mom.
Well, no, just to.
Mom, I don't think you know that, but the battery on an iPhone is slow. No, fast. But
Get out.
stop.
There's a line for a reason. Get out.
What do you mean? What line?
Get out. Get out.
Hey. Got that old mom. Auntie, I got that old auntie phone.
You look crazy.
Shut up.
Okay.
What else
He's
you
the one
auntie?
that was choking me.
Cap.
He said you.
Go, auntie. I'm being on.
Okay, now you're on my camera.
Yeah, I think nobody wants you inside the camera.
You're really rude.
No, I'm not. I just told the truth.
Okay, watch out for the miniatures. Watch out for miniatures. Watch out for miniatures. You have to use costume the bridges. Oh, look at the coins.
Where are the coins?
Koi, K-O.
Yeah, I know, Mom. Mom. K-Y-O.
K-Y-O, koi.
Yes.
If they want you, let's keep you in the water. Just wait for them to come and then we'll go.
Just the wildlife.
You know I can choke you in an instant, right?
Sure. I've seen bigger and thicker too. If we get a no. I'm not watching Barney.
Going up there. Yeah.
Why am I going first? I feel like they're testing me to make sure I get up here okay.
No, not with him.
Only time will tell.
That what he said.
DJ, you are not breaking the laws.
I truly can.
They're making improvements. Hi, how are you?
Mom.
How are you?
I'm very wet. And me. Crocodile. Crocodile pizza.
You can finally have a little brother.
No, thank you.
No sister.
No, thank you.
I thought you said you wanted a little sibling.
No, they're annoying.
More free play. Any of the trees that you saved?
No.
Are you gonna listen to this at night and go to sleep?
No. I don't want to.
Are you following me because you love your mother?
You're following me. I don't know what you're talking about. They're golden. Are they golden, Mom?
I know. Do you think their really color is gold or?
Probably gold or orange. Mom, I should do this slide underneath here. No, not move it. Slide underneath. No, we didn't. I mean, it really not that deep.
That's pretty. Oh, that one's close to. Oh, I think that's the same.
It's up. Yeah, both the same. We can't cross the bridge. And there's her to be. Serious answer.
So by chance,
Cap.
edit that out.
That's F only. That's F only. Can't go over there. Ooh, that wild animal.
That's wow.
Inside of what?
Yeah, what do you want me to do?
I mean, we already broke one.
No, don't do it.
Look what he did.
You want more? No. Okay, I gave it to Kylie.
I mean, I can jump.
No, no, no. He said no. No.
You know what that says?
Yeah, so right over here, dummy. What did I done? Ah.
Everyone remembers. Well, apparently.
Oh, Mom,
That's what we
technically.
do. Oh my gosh, we keep coming
Sorry.
to dead ends.
Because there's nothing but dead ends.
No, they're working on it.
Pardon our mess.
So I wonder what it's going to do.
And we're back where we started.
No, we do what?
What do you mean the squirrel is over there?
No, it's not.
Squirrel.
Where?
The squirrel.
That old fashioned.
It is temporary.
There was a bird. No, it was Superman.
I was supposed to say
Let's take a picture. The powers of the universe.
He died.
What that song is, I know who He-Man is.
She-Ra.
Go on this for people.
I just knew her name was Shira.
Oh.
Okay, Daniel, here's something you know about that phone. You're going to lose a lot of data and memory if you keep doing video.
And I think
Really? Get it! Okay.
It's past the area where I can't go.
No, you just have to wait your turn.
No, just
Against the wall makes kitty.
what the hell? You drinking water? There's lily pads. There were the frogs.
Ribbit. Did they say ribbit?
No.
Oh. Did you say ribbit? Yeah, those frogs go ribbit. Yeah, you don't. And then cows go moo.
There's another field. I would just say one, but there's another one. We don't attack you.
Then you're like, all right.
Hey,
Oh, I was gonna take a picture. You guys go back over there.
I'm good. Another one. Wait, we have to go over there.
It's the Buddha.
The Buddha food.
No. It's not a thing.
That is.
Dean! I jumped up. Okay. Excuse, I'm sorry.
This is what you do to me all the time. Everything go up. It did. You just shook my whole body somehow.
Yeah.
What does it say?
Wait, perfect. That what it says. Where do you think that? No.
Isn't that you?
That,
Is that this whole one?
I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing, Kathleen. But over there, that's food. Are you ready to eat? The food over there. You are? Oh. We're inside here. God.
Sometimes I wonder about it. Oh yeah, because there's the turkey bottle thingy. You guys want to do the tour at 11?
What's
It's not
food?
11. Oh, it is 11.
Nah, can we just not do the tour?
Let's go to the museum.
Well, yeah, we'll go to the museum.
To the other gardens.
Oh, the other gardens are.
But the original was from the World's Fair. And even though the museum and the tea gardens had buildings and structures, John felt they fit his vision for the park, something out here in the country that people can leave the city and get to experience things they wouldn't get in their day-to-day life. Now, the gate you came through when you entered the garden today is not the original gate from the World's Fair. The original lasted almost 100 years. This gate was built in 1985, made out of Japanese hinoki. And the hinoki wood is so prized for ceremonial construction that the Japanese government only allowed that wood to leave the country of Japan on conditions that the Japanese artisans and craftsmen be imported to construct the gate. It took a crew of 18 carpenters 12 months to put it together. Then in traditional Japanese joinery style, there's not a nail in the entire structure. It all just fits together. Now, the cost of that gate in 1985 was $1.3 million, which is a very expensive gate. But they tell us it should last 300 years. And if you amortize 1.3 over 300, it's only $4,000 a year, much more reasonable. Plus, the great thing about a 300-year warranty, if it were to fail 100 years from now, no one's going to be around to remember who said that. It's a win-win on that. The Monterey pine tree is planted in front of the gate, not only to welcome you, the visitor, to the garden, but specifically to repel the evil spirits. If the evil spirits were to get through that gate, sneak past the ticket taker, they'd run smack into that tree. Though they're very evil, they're not very bright. They wouldn't know which way do we go, to the right, to the left. They turn right around, run straight out the gate, giving us an evil spirit-free garden. So again, this is a free walking tour. San Francisco City Guides. Everybody's welcome. We're going to start the walking part now. Follow me.
Okay.
On my left, on your right, or in front of you, is a Japanese boxwood that's been carved to give the illusion of a mountain range leading over to a snow-covered mountain peak in the distance. Now, the snow is represented by a different plant, slightly lighter color, English boxwood. The original English boxwood plant died out a few years ago, leaving that mountain looking like it had had a volcanic eruption with a huge crater on top. It's been replanted, grown in nicely. The gardeners trim it off flat because that's supposed to be representative of the snow-covered flat plateau atop Mount Fuji.
Cannot trust. And boo.
So in Japanese flower arrangement, artwork, and architecture, oftentimes you'll find three different elements. Three different shapes, sizes, or colors. Either representative of heaven, man, and earth, or in the Buddhist tradition, the teacher, the student, and the community. And these three stones here are representative of those three different elements of life. This particular rock is California's official state rock, serpentine, commonly known as blue rock. Very strong volcanic rock that comes from deep inside the earth, found throughout California and also in Japan. It was heavily used in building and road construction in the United States up until the mid-1980s. The properties of this stone that make it a very strong building product also make it a potentially dangerous one because it's heavily laced with asbestos. Knowing what we know today, we no longer grind it up or we might breathe it in the future. It's no danger in its natural state. So the basin behind me comes from the state outside of Tokyo that was destroyed during the firebombing of World War II. It's the oldest artifact in the garden. It's a crouching basin. The purpose of the basin is if you were going to a tea house for a formal tea ceremony, before you went in, you would come to the basin, humble yourself by crouching down, wash your hands and your mouth so you're going clean. But before you walked away from the basin, carved right here in the corner is a turtle. Turtles are good luck, and you wouldn't want to miss the opportunity. A little scratch on the back, maybe a little bit of that turtle good luck.
Got it. Okay. Oh. Excuse me. Oh, so we're out. I was testing the turtle.
How'd you like the turtle?
You also walk.
Do you feel special now?
On the other
No.
side of the railing is the sunken garden, and it's an addition done to the tea gardens in the 1940s. Now, we talk about the history of the tea gardens. They were created as a fair attraction 131 years ago, and no one could have imagined we would be here today talking about them. So no one thought to document the creation in any official historic way. Of course, nobody's here today who was here then, so when we look for history of the tea gardens, all we really have to go on our newspaper accounts. And in San Francisco, at one point, there were over 100 newspapers. In the 20th century, that boiled down to two major dailies: Charles DeYoung's morning paper, The Chronicle, and William Randolph Hearst afternoon paper, The Examiner. Now, The Chronicle was the slightly more conservative, and The Examiner the slightly more liberal of the two papers. And when we talk about the history of the tea gardens, it's a more conservative history and a more liberal history. There's an Anglo history and a Japanese history, and oftentimes they conflict. I'll try to give you as balanced a view as I can. The Anglo creating the tea garden for the fair was a man named George Turner Marsh. He was from Richmond, Australia. He settled in a part of San Francisco we now call the Richmond District, named in honor of his hometown. He immigrated to California with his family as a teenager. And on their way here, they stopped in Japan. He became so enamored with Japanese art and Japanese culture, he asked if he could stay behind in Japan and join them the following year. They agreed. He eventually did come to San Francisco, continued his love for all things Japanese. He opened the first Japanese art store in the United States, Palace Hotel, in 1876. When the concept of the World's Fair came along and the idea of a Japanese-style garden, he was the Anglo in San Francisco that knew the most about Asian culture, and he was charged with creating the garden for the fair. After the fair closed, he went on to do other projects. He was involved with the Huntington Gardens in Pasadena, Balboa Park in San Diego, and he built a private Japanese retreat at his property in Marin County. Now, John McLaren had decided the tea gardens would remain as a permanent attraction in Golden Gate Park, and he hired a man named Makoto Hagiwara to run the concessions. Mr. Hagiwara had immigrated to San Francisco from Japan in 1879. He opened one of the first Japanese restaurants here in the city, and had a very successful sake and silk importation business, but he was a huge fan of Japanese-style gardening. When the opportunity came up to run the concessions here, he jumped at the chance. He was in charge from 1895 until 1901. In 1901, there was a huge anti-Asian movement in San Francisco. There was a lot of racism. There was fear for jobs. There was a plague in Chinatown. We didn't yet understand how plagues are spread. Chinatown had been put under quarantine. We had a mayor in office, Mayor Failing, who'd run on a platform of anti-immigration. He got together with the Board of Supervisors, and they changed the city charter to make it illegal for San Francisco to hire anyone who wasn't a United States citizen. Now, at this point in time, federal law prohibited Asian immigrants from becoming naturalized citizens. So when the new local law went into effect, Mr. Hagiwara was evicted from the garden. He settled just outside of Golden Gate Park in the block bound by Lincoln and Irving at 7th and 8th Avenue. He built a competing tea garden there and ran all of his family businesses from that location. Now they needed somebody to run the concessions here, and because of this new law, no one of Asian descent was eligible. The mayor had a buddy, a guy named Walter Martin, who needed a job, so he signed on. He was in charge from 1901 until 1906. April 18th, 5:12 in the morning, 1906, San Francisco experienced a large earthquake. The earth shook, some buildings fell down, some people were injured, and unfortunately, some people were killed. The real disaster of 06 happened hours after the earth stopped shaking. The real disaster was not from the earthquake itself, but the fires that followed. Gas lines are broken, water lines are broken, and chimneys are broken. One of the first victims of the initial shaking was our fire chief. The firehouse he lived in collapsed around him. He died a few days later. The day-to-day activity of people living in a city caused small fires. When those small fires broke out, we didn't have a fire chief to run the crews. The firefighting apparatus we had couldn't navigate the streets because they were strewn with bricks. And if they could get to a fire, chances are there wasn't any water there to put it out. The city burnt for 3.5 days. Out here in Golden Gate Park, there weren't tall buildings to fall down or things to catch fire. But here, the Presidio, anywhere else there was open land, is where the refugees came to escape the carnage of the disaster. People were afraid to go inside buildings that were still standing, and they felt safer camping out in Golden Gate Park. We were cut off from tourism, cut off from the outside world under martial law. General Funston was in charge. The mayor's buddy wasn't getting the nickels he was used to from the concessions here, and he abandoned the tea garden. John McLaren had a huge problem. There were tens of thousands of people living throughout all his parks. No normal businessman would have signed on to run the concessions here, because at this point it wasn't clear if we were going to be able to rebound from the disaster. Remember, in 1906, San Francisco was a relatively new community, and very few people were betting on our success. So John went to the Board of Supervisors and asked special dispensation to be able to invite Mr. Hagiwara back. They agreed. John went and knocked on his door. I can only imagine what went through his mind when he was invited back, because of course he wanted to go back to the special place. He must have realized he had the upper hand in these negotiations. He agreed to come back, but he had a couple of conditions. First off, he wanted to make permanent curator of the garden. He didn't want to put another 5 years of his life into it, have a political change in the city, and get evicted all over again. The city agreed, and they granted him a lifetime lease on the tea garden. And in that lease, he negotiated the right to build a traditional Japanese-style house in the garden and live here in the garden with his family for the rest of his life. The house he built sat right where we're standing today. The gate we're standing in the shadow of is the gate that led to the family home. It was a large 17-room house that spanned out over and across what is today the sunken garden. The ground floor held a grand banquet room that could seat 200 people for formal Japanese banquets, and many formal banquets down here in the Hagiwara home. Now, he lived here with his daughter, her husband, and their 3 children. And his firstborn grandson was named George. Mikado took George everywhere with him and taught George everything he could about gardening. And when Mikado passed away in the tea gardens in 1925, George became the driving force of the family, taking them forward into the next generation. And everything moved forward for the Hagiwaras here in the tea garden up until December 7th, 1941. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, everything changed in the United States and, for that matter, the world. Overnight, we were at war with Germany, Italy, and Japan. But Germans and Italians didn't suffer the same consequences that Japanese and Japanese Americans did, especially here on the West Coast. The president controlled the United States into different zones under different military leaders. General John DeWitt was in charge of the West Coast, and he decided that anyone of Japanese descent needed to be put under curfew and have anything that could be considered a communication device or a weapon confiscated. All radios were taken away. All weapons up to including large kitchen knives were confiscated. Japanese families in San Francisco weren't allowed out of the house after 10 o'clock at night and were never allowed to the top of the hills at any time of the day for fear they could signal enemy ships coming into the gate. And again, none of these restrictions on Germans or Italians. There were some leaders in the German and Italian community that were in prison during the war, but that was for individual specific crimes they were suspected of committing. The restrictions I'm talking about now happen to every man, woman, and child of Japanese descent here on the West Coast. The military leader in charge of the Western Zone decided in early 42 that these restrictions weren't going to be enough to keep America safe. And he floated the idea of relocation. Initially, it was a voluntary program. Families were given the opportunity to move away from the coast to the inland of the United States. Very few people left. Their jobs, their homes, their family, their entire way of life, everything they knew was here on the West Coast. Most people stayed put, not knowing what was yet to come. February 19th, 1942, that voluntary program became the forced relocation. The Japanese families on the West Coast were given 1 week to pack what they could in a suitcase they could carry, and then taken from their homes by armed military police. The Hagiwaras were removed from the tea garden, initially taken to a horse racetrack on the peninsula, the Tanforan racetrack. They were housed there in horse stalls until they were sent further inland. They ended up at the Topaz relocation camp in southern Utah. Now, at the time, they were told it was their own good, their own protection to keep them safe. But if you look at any photographs of the camps, the guard towers face in to keep people from getting out. They don't face out to keep people from getting in. Within a week of being taken from the garden, the family home was demolished. The name of the gardens was changed. The word Japanese was dropped from the title. It wasn't until 1953 that it became known as the Japanese Tea Gardens again. Now, of the 120,000 people interned to the United States during World War II, 80,000 of them were American citizens. It's a very sad part of our history, but it is our history. It's not an easy story for me to tell, and I'm sure it's not an easy one to hear, but to me, the most important stories are the hard stories because I have to believe if we continue to tell them, listen to them, and repeat them, hopefully we as a country won't make the same mistakes in the future we've made in the past. Now, the Sunken Garden here is not an official memorial or commemoration to the Hagiwaras, but it's very fittingly representative of the beauty they created for us. Many people come to the garden, walk the garden, enjoy its beauty, know nothing of the history, and enjoy it nonetheless. And many people come here and they may miss this one very beautiful section by not taking a moment to walk to the railing and look down upon it. So again, this is a free walking tour of San Francisco City Guides. Everybody's welcome. We're going to walk on to the next spot.
Me.
Yeah, that's it.
As I mentioned before, the Sunken Garden is not a memorial to the Hagiwaras, but up until 1980, there was nothing in the garden that commemorated their contribution. In 1960, the San Francisco Garden Club placed a plaque Below the cherry tree, they are recognizing George Turner Marsh's creation of the garden. Now, he was here during the building garden in the 6 months the World's Fair was open, and then he left. The Hagiwars were here for decades and generations. In the late 70s, the group got together and approached the city about a plaque. The city agreed to be appropriate, but they had no money to pay for the plaque. Private funds were generated, and a local artist was hired for the commission. The artist who was hired was a Japanese-American artist, a woman named Ruth Asano. Internationally known, she worked in large, bronze, and also some very intricate wire-woven basket sculptures. If you've ever taken the elevator to the top of the tower at the Young Museum, in that elevator lobby are some beautiful woven sculptures she did that cast incredible shadows on the walls behind her. But what she did for the Hagiwaras is behind me here on this guardian stone. Bronze plaque that wraps that stone. It's in English on the front, Japanese on the side. There are 2 bronze frogs with it, and 3 more bronze frogs hidden down by the water's edge. Now, one of the words for frog in Japanese has a double meaning. Not only does it mean the amphibious creature we call a frog, but it also means to return or to come back to. And although the Hagiwara family never returned to the tea gardens in any official capacity after the war, the beauty they created for us here continues to come back with every change of season, with every sunrise, with every sunset. We continue to get it coming back to us time and time. Behind me is the moon bridge or the drum bridge, and even though it's only half a circle, when the water's still, you get the reflection and the illusion of the full moon. Moon bridges are arched, very steep for narrow waterways so boats can traverse underneath. We have no boats in our pond. For us, it's strictly ornamental. This is the 6th or 7th moon bridge we've had over the years. They don't last forever. They get a lot of foot traffic up and over, up and over. It's probably one of the most heavily photographed locations in Golden Gate Park, especially during graduation and wedding season. There'll often be parties lined up, all trying to get that perfect shot with that full moon illusion.
Don't say excuse me, go through. Daniel, open your mouth. Say excuse me.
Excuse me.
Sabu ko juga bukannya. Pretty na to.
Oh, they're already over there.
Where's the guy?
Oh, there you
You over there. Oh, no.
Yes, I've talked about a couple. But, that tree right there? Like, one right there? Yeah, that's those 4 trees right there are cypress. Those are the ones you're talking about. They're coastal trees. They grow on your nose. Now that's a pine tree. Well, one guy's a whole different.
Oh, I know what bonsai is, but they have that.
They are trimmed.
They have that trim.
I know, right?
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So the gate behind me comes from the 1915 Pan American Pacific International Exposition. It was a World's Fair held in San Francisco to commemorate the opening of the Panama Canal and San Francisco's rebirth after the earthquake and fire. It was held in an area that we now call the Marina District. Prior to the earthquake, that was part of San Francisco Bay, Washerwoman's Cove, a freshwater lagoon where the miners used to have their laundry done. After the earthquake, a lot of debris and rubble were pushed in the bay just to get rid of it. When the concept for the World's Fair came along, the idea of having it, initially they thought they would do it in Golden Gate Park again, but John McLaren said no. Someone suggested Washerwoman's Cove. The area was leveled out and filled in completely with sand and bay mud, and it became the fairgrounds. After the fair was dismantled, it sat vacant for a number of years until a developer took it over and created the housing development, the Marina District. And ironically, that's the part of San Francisco that was most heavily damaged during the next major earthquake, the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Because, of course, it was all built on cheap, quick fill. When there was shaking of the earth, there was liquefaction of the soil, and we had apartment buildings built on top of unreinforced garages collapse into themselves. We did lose a couple major freeways and part of the Bay Bridge, but the structural damage in San Francisco was mostly in the marina. The gate came from the Japanese pavilion at the World's Fair, and it was salvaged and brought here because it's a beautiful piece of Japanese carpentry. It's only been used as an entrance to the Tea Garden during one period. In 1985, when the gate U came through was being rebuilt, this became the new main entrance to the Tea Garden. When the new gate was completed, this gate was closed off. The same carpenters that built the new gate came over and rethatched the roof here, but there's never been a need to have two entrances to the Tea Garden open at the same time. So when we talk about the history of the internment of Japanese and Japanese Americans during World War II, it's scary to think about today. And looking back historically, we know what happened. I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been to be living through it, not knowing where you were going, what was going to happen if you were ever coming back. A lot of real and personal property was lost by Japanese families during the war. They only had a week to get their affairs in order. Homes were abandoned or sold for pennies on the dollar. Businesses were walked away from. They couldn't entrust their valuables to any family members because their family members were all in the same situation. The Hagiwaras were a very wealthy family. Not from the Tea Garden itself, but all the other family businesses. And when the word came down that they were going to be sent to the internment camps, they packed up as many of their valuable belongings as they could. They shipped them off to Marin County, putting them in storage in a barn belonging to a friend of theirs, a man named Sam Newsom. Again, not knowing if they were ever coming back. When the war was over and the relocation camps were open, the Hagiwara family was the last family to leave the Topaz. They didn't have a home to come back to. Their home had been destroyed. They no longer had a lease on the tea gardens. All of their businesses were confiscated. They were broke. They approached Mr. Newsom and asked if he could arrange a sale of some very special potted bonsai plants that had been trusted to his care during the war. Now, he had a customer, Dr. and Audrey Frazier. They had a large estate in Oakland. He arranged the sale of those plants. Those plants went to Oakland, and they were with the Fraziers until 1964 when Audrey Frazier passed away. And in her will, she willed the two bronze herons you see in the pond over there. They came from her garden. She also willed the entire collection of potted bonsai plants back to the tea garden from where they came. Now, they're no longer bonsai. They're not in pots. They're planted in the ground. But it's a collection of plants behind me on the bank below the waterfall. Those are the plants that gave the Hagiwara family the seed money to start their new life. When the family got the proceeds from the sale of those plants, they decided not to come back to San Francisco. They felt they needed a new city to start a new chapter of their life, and they chose to relocate to Portland, Oregon. But the life they were living in Oregon was very different than the privileged life they'd lived here in San Francisco. In Oregon, the family was on government assistance. George was working at a poultry processing plant just trying to make ends meet. His mother was miserable. She hated Oregon, hated the weather. She was after George to take extra shifts, work overtime, so they could save enough money and get back to San Francisco. In 1950, the family bought a small house in the Richmond district, and George's daughter, the youngest of the Hagiwaras to be interned, still lives in that house.
Ahí se queda. Y ahí se queda. She just set this up with ours.
Oh, sorry.
So at the top of the stairs is the pagoda, and there's also a beautiful gate. They're both from the World's Fair in 1915. When the pagoda was first brought here, it originally sat on the other side of that gate in a grove of trees. And the gate used to be the beer and sake concession from the food court at the World's Fair. What sat at the top of these stairs where the pagoda sits today was the Hagiwara family Shinto shrine. These stairs were the entrance to the shrine, the penance stairs. If you were going into the shrine to give thanks or ask forgiveness, you would come up these stairs and pause and contemplate with every step you took before you took the next step forward. The shrine, like the family home, was demolished during World War II. At that point, Shinto was the official religion of the Japanese government, and it was very unpopular to be associated with anything Japanese, especially here on the West Coast. The foundation sat vacant until after the war when the pagoda was relocated to the top of the stairs. Now, the pagoda is well over 100 years old today, built as a fair attraction and never intended to last this long and sit outside in Golden Gate Park. And it's recently undergone a major restoration, looking better today than it's ever looked before. That restoration is continuing with some very elaborate stonework around the base of the pagoda. That's why the area is closed off to us today. We don't have full access to it, but we're going to go around the back side and look at the progress of the construction.
No, his face was so upset the camera.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
The other guy said sorry.
Yeah, at least he has something. Yeah, at least he acknowledged that he walked through it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He sure feels very good. Daniel, why are you recording everything? You're recording the ground.
Yeah. Hmm?
Next garden.
Okay, let's calm that down.